Our next presenter is Todd DeShane from Zen.org, and yes, and he's going to be talking about open source infrastructure as a service and cloud computing. You're all welcome, Todd.
Hi. So, like you said, I'm Todd DeShane. I'm a technology evangelist for Zen.org. And I'm based out of Amsterdam, New York. And so I came today to talk to you about cloud computing, but specifically in the sense of how open source is a big part of that, and how Zen and OpenStack and projects like that I've had some familiarity over the years with. I've been a big part of that cloud computing and open source history and fitting well together and kind of where things are going for projects like that, and how do you try to get involved. That's kind of like the point is kind of share some of the current things that are going on, maybe interest enough people to, just somebody goes out and tries it, and maybe you find yourself interested in this type of technology, and you find yourself working for some company because you worked on this project. So just a little bit of background about me, real briefly. I've used open source software for over 10 years. Started on Gen 2 Linux. I did research around virtualization and security, and I've kind of spent a lot of time with Zen, and I ended up at my university. We had a team of us that co-authored a book called Running Zen, and through that experience I got to go to conferences and present tutorials and research on things around virtualization and Zen. And so I ended up, after finishing my PhD, getting to work for Citrix through for the Zen.org community, which is an open source project. And so, just as a quick overview of what I'm going to talk about today, I'll talk about some virtualization basics. How many people have ever used some sort of virtualization software, VMware or whatever, even? So there's a fair amount. So there's a fair number of people that have actually used virtualization. About half of you have. And so if there's questions, feel free to just ask and jump in. If something, there's a fair amount of virtualization things that you might need that I'm going to try to cover, but due to time, it's probably won't cover it in as much depth as you might necessarily, But just jump in with questions, feel free. I'm then going to cover some of the cloud computing basic terminology, just put this talk in kind of like perspective versus, say, like the other types of cloud computing that you might have worked with. This is lower level on the stack. I'll then spend time specifically on the technologies that I'm familiar with and how they kind of fit into this, and then I'll spend a little bit of time just showing you some examples of how you can do some, using it, developing it, just working with technology just at a very high level, and how you might want to go forward with it. So, you're familiar with virtualized system, and for those of you that haven't used virtualization before, you start with your physical hardware, and on top of that, in order to have some virtual machines running, you need some sort of software that's going to monitor those virtual machines, and that's either called a hypervisor or virtual machine monitor. And so you install that software onto the system, and then typically, and this is more specific to the Zen case, but there's always some sort of control domain or entity that's doing the managing of the virtual machines, And in Zen terminology, that's called domain 0. And then through that control, you can then create guest virtual machines. And in Zen terminology, those are called domain use. So those are just like any operating system installed basically into a virtual environment, whether it be a file or a separate partition or a cell phone network. That's managed by the hypervisor and the control domain, so it's controlling what's going on. So that's just basics. If there's something that you want to ask about, feel free. So there's several cloud computing delivery models, and the first that most people are probably familiar with is software as a service, and that's basically just typically you see this as web-based applications, things like Gmail, Google Docs, Facebook, and there's at the next level down, there's a thing called the platform as a service. And in that case, what's being provided by that platform is a software environment so that developers can have a place to run their applications or develop their applications on that platform. And so there's two types of any cloud offering. It's either public or private, and we'll go into the details of that. But these first couple here, the public ones, there are other companies provide them to you, so they're a public service, so you can access it from somewhere else. And their Google App Engine and Microsoft Windows Azure are two examples. On the other hand, there's what's called private computing, and that's something that's running basically in your control, maybe in your data center or something like that. And the two examples are Cloud Foundry and Apprenda. I mentioned Apprenda. It's an up-and-coming startup. It's actually based in Clifton Park, so it's a neat company that's doing some very interesting work in the area. They're not actually open source, but they probably work with a fair amount of open source in what they do. And then finally, at the lowest level is infrastructure as service, and what this will provide is the computing environment. And you may be familiar with things like Amazon EC2, which is the Elastic Compute Cloud. Has anybody ever used EC2? A couple. Okay. So those are again examples of public service providers that provide compute resources to anybody that wants to pay for service, like access to a server, so they can get an account through either Amazon or Rackspace and go and create virtual machines or in basically Amazon's servers in their data center, and use them to do whatever they want. Like people run businesses on EC2, for example. Just an example. They do their web company, for example. And then you have the private side of that space is software projects like OpenStack, CloudStack, or Eucalyptus, and those pieces of software allow a company to run their own cloud, so they can run it internally for their own use, or they could use it to serve a similar service to what Amazon and Rackspace do. And Rackspace actually uses some of the code that's in OpenStack right now in production use, and there's other companies that are using this type of software, OpenStack, CloudStack, for production use as well. And so the infrastructure as a service portion is what the focus of this talk is going to be. Okay, so just to clarify the deployment models, and so there's public, which is some third party that's offsite, so you're paying for a service that you use, it's hosted somewhere else. And that's all, like I said, Amazon, EC2, Backspace Cloud, for example. And then the other extreme is if you're hosting in your own data center. If you're using your own software, you might use something like OpenStack or CloudStack or Eucalyptus to build a cloud. It's in private. And so there's a term called hybrid. And for our use of hybrid, it's going to be just a combination of the two models. You might run some of your workload locally, but then burst into the cloud to use some resources like an Amazon or a Rackspace. Okay, so just to give a bit of history specific to Zen, but Zen has been a integral part of the cloud computing story, and it's a big open source win. Back in 1999, in the in the 90s in general, there's a research group in Cambridge, at Cambridge University in the UK, that came up with the concept of xenoservers, and they called xenoservers machines that can safely and securely perform useful work on behalf of any user who's prepared to pay for the resources consumed. And out of that work, they needed some way to partition the physical machines to be able to have different people pay for different resources, and so they needed something to do that, and they came up with Zen hypervisor to do that, and so they wrote that. And one of the guys on the team, Evangelos, he wrote a dissertation that basically defines cloud computing as we know it today, and that he defined global computing. And it says, this dissertation proposes a new distributed computing paradigm termed global public computing, which allows any user to run any code anywhere. Such platforms price computing resources and ultimately charge users for resources consumed. So that's basically what we're talking about in terms of what Amazon or Rackspace provide people. So the interesting thing to see is that these ideas are coming out of universities, and it's what we're working with today in the cloud. I think that's a good takeaway in general, is the work that's going on in the university.